The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a scream in the darkness. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen watched the readouts cascade across her command console aboard the UES Retribution, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests of her captain's chair. The distress signal was unlike anything she'd ever encountered, not just in its alien frequency patterns, but in the raw desperation that seemed to bleed through the electromagnetic spectrum itself. "Signal analysis complete, Commander," reported Tech Specialist Rodriguez from his station. "The transmission is definitely non-human in origin. Computers running translation protocols now, but the mathematical patterns, they're screaming for help." Sarah's jaw tightened. 3 years ago, humanity had made first contact with the Galactic Federation, a collection of peaceful species that had been exploring the stars for millennia. The humans had been welcomed with open arms, though many Federation species had been quietly horrified by Earth's violent history and the humans' apparent immunity to most forms of radiation, toxins, and physical trauma that would kill other species outright. The Federation had labeled humans as Deathworlders, beings from a planet so hostile that its inhabitants had evolved into something approaching biological weapons. Most Federation species came from garden worlds with carefully controlled climates and minimal predators. Earth, with its violent weather, tectonic activity, and ecosystem full of creatures designed to kill each other, was considered a nightmare planet. But right now, those nightmare planet inhabitants might be someone's only hope. "Commander, we're receiving a response from Federation Command," Communications Officer Park announced. "They're requesting immediate assistance for a colony under attack. Sector 7 Alpha, the Kepler system." Sarah's blood ran cold. The Kepler system housed New Geneva, a Federation colony of nearly 50,000 beings from a dozen different species. Peaceful researchers, families, children, none of them equipped for warfare. "What kind of attack?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The reports are fragmented," Park continued, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Something about mechanical beings. Self-replicating. The colonists are calling them devourers." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. The Federation had told humanity about the devourers, an ancient scourge that had wiped out entire sectors of the galaxy millions of years ago. They were supposedly extinct, destroyed by some long-forgotten civilization. But if they were back, how long until we reached the Kepler system? Sarah asked. "At maximum burn, 18 hours, replied Navigator Williams. "Too long." Sarah stood, her mind racing. "Rodriguez, patch me through to the rest of the fleet. All channels, maximum encryption." As the communication array hummed to life, Sarah took a deep breath. The human fleet in this sector consisted of 12 ships, destroyers, cruisers, and the flightship Retribution. Not much by Federation standards, but human ships were built different. They had to be. Where Federation vessels were elegant, efficient, and designed for exploration, human ships were built for war. They were armored, armed to the teeth, and crewed by beings whose ancestors had spent millions of years learning to survive on a planet that actively tried to kill them. "This is Commander Chen to all vessels," she began, her voice carrying across the void to her fellow humans. "We have a code black situation. Federation colony under attack by what appears to be a devourer incursion. I know what you're thinking, they're supposed to be extinct. Well, apparently nobody told them that." She paused, looking out at the stars. "The colony has sent an SOS. 50,000 beings, most of them civilians. The Federation's nearest response fleet is 3 days out. We're the only ones who can reach them in time." The responses came back almost immediately. "Captain Torres from the Dauntless, we're with you, Commander. Captain Nakamura from the Vengeful, already adjusting course." One by one, each ship's captain checked in. No hesitation, no debate. When someone sent an SOS, you answered. It was that simple. "All right, people," Sarah continued. "We're going in fast and hard. Maximum burn to Kepler system. I want all weapons hot, all Marines prepped for ground assault. And I want our xenobiologist teams ready, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." As the human fleet adjusted course and began their high-speed burn toward the Kepler system, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were rushing towards something far worse than a simple pirate raid or territorial dispute. The Devourers had been the stuff of nightmares for a billion years. If they were truly back, then the galaxy was in for a war unlike anything it had seen since the dawn of civilization. 18 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, and Sarah's worst fears were confirmed. The space around New Geneva was a graveyard. Twisted metal debris floated in expanding clouds, the remains of Federation defense platforms and civilian vessels. But worse than the destruction was what was causing it. The Devourers were unlike anything in the Federation's databases. They appeared to be mechanical in nature, but they moved with an organic fluidity that suggested some form of hybrid technology. They were roughly humanoid in shape but scaled up to the size of small buildings, their bodies covered in what looked like living metal that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. "Dear God," whispered someone on the bridge. Sarah didn't blame them. The Devourers were tearing through the orbital defenses like they were made of paper. Each one seemed to be equipped with energy weapons that could slice through starship hull plating like butter, and worse, they appeared to be converting the destroyed material into more of themselves. "Commander, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the planet's surface," Park reported. "The colony's main city is under siege. The Devourers have established some kind of landing sites. They're growing." Sarah's tactical display lit up with target indicators. Dozens of Devourers in orbit, more landing on the planet's surface. The Federation's database had been woefully inadequate. These weren't just ancient weapons, they were an entire ecosystem of destruction. "Commander," Rodriguez called out, "I'm picking up some kind of central signal." The Devourers appear to be networked. There's a primary hub ship, about 10 kilometers out from the main cluster. Sarah studied the display. The hub ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of her flagship. It was also clearly the source of the network signals coordinating the attack. Take out the hub, and the Devourers might lose their coordination. "All ships, this is Commander Chen. We're going to hit them hard and fast. Primary target is the hub ship. Secondary targets are the orbital Devourers. We need to clear a path for ground assault shuttles." "Commander," interrupted her Marine commander, Colonel Martinez, "my people are ready for ground assault, but we need to know what we're dealing with down there. The reports from the surface are chaotic." Sarah pulled up the surface scans. The colony's main city was in ruins, but there were still thousands of life signs scattered throughout the underground bunkers and emergency shelters. The Devourers had established what looked like conversion sites, areas where they were processing raw materials into more of their kind. "Colonel, your mission is search and rescue. Get our people out of there. The scientists can worry about studying these things later." "Understood, Commander." "What about the Federation colonists?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "There are people too. Everyone gets out." The human fleet moved into attack formation. Unlike Federation ships, which relied on elegant maneuvers and precise energy weapons, human vessels were built for brutal efficiency. They closed distance quickly, their armor plating designed to absorb punishment while their weapons systems focused on overwhelming firepower. The Devourers responded immediately. Energy beams lanced out from their positions, striking the lead human vessels. But something unexpected happened. The beams, which had sliced through Federation ships like they were made of tissue paper, barely scratched the human armor. "Damage report," Sarah called out. "Minor hull scoring on the Dauntless," came the reply. "Their weapons are designed for Federation materials. Our armor's too dense." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. "One advantage of being from a death world, you learn to build things tough. All ships, weapons free. Let's show these things what Deathworlders can do." The human fleet opened fire, and the space around New Geneva lit up like a star-going nova. Human weapons were designed for one purpose: to destroy things as efficiently as possible. Particle beams, plasma cannons, kinetic kill vehicles, and exotic matter warheads all converged on the Devourer positions. The results were immediate and devastating. The Devourer's adaptive armor, which had proven nearly invulnerable to Federation weapons, couldn't adapt fast enough to the variety and intensity of human firepower. One by one, the orbital devourers began to fall. But the hub ship was another matter entirely. It was massive, heavily armored, and as soon as it came under attack, it began to change. The liquid metal surface rippled and flowed, forming new weapons systems, new defensive configurations. It was learning, adapting in real time to the human attack. "Commander, the hub ship is modifying itself," Rodriguez reported. It's copying our weapons signatures." Sarah watched in horror as the hub ship began firing weapons that looked remarkably similar to human particle beams. But they were firing at the planet's surface, not at the human fleet. "They're targeting the colony," she shouted. "All ships, concentrate fire on the hub ship. We need to take it down now." The human fleet focused their fire on the massive vessel, but it was already too late. The hub ship's weapons struck the planet's surface with devastating effect. Entire sections of the colony vanished in explosions of light and heat. "Commander, I'm reading massive casualties on the surface," Park reported, his voice breaking. "The underground shelters, they're gone." Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. The Devourers hadn't just been trying to destroy the colony, they'd been using it as bait. They'd wanted to draw in a rescue fleet, to study their technology, to learn from their weapons. "Rodriguez, are you still tracking the network signals?" "Yes, Commander. But there's something else. The hub ship, it's not just coordinating the local Devourers. It's sending signals out system. Long range, faster than light communications." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "They're calling for reinforcements." "More than that," Rodriguez continued. "The signal patterns, they're information packets. Weapon specifications, tactical data, everything they've learned from our attack. They're sharing it with the rest of their kind." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Devourers weren't just back, they were learning. Every battle, every engagement, every weapon fired in their direction was teaching them how to fight the galaxy's defenders more effectively. "Commander," Captain Torres's voice crackled over the comm, "we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures. Multiple contacts, approaching from hyperspace." Sarah's display updated with new contacts. Dozens of them, all with the same energy signatures as the hub ship. The Devourers hadn't just survived extinction, they'd been preparing for this moment for millions of years. "All ships, prepare for." The space around New Geneva exploded into chaos as the Devourer reinforcements arrived. Not dozens of ships, but hundreds. Each one was different, adapted for specific purposes. Some were massive like the hub ship, others were smaller and faster, and some were unlike anything in anyone's database. "Commander, we're outnumbered 50-1, reported Navigator Williams, his voice steady despite the odds. Sarah looked at her display, then at her crew. They were good people, all of them. They'd followed her into hell itself without question. But this was beyond anything they'd trained for. "Commander," Colonel Martinez's voice came over the comm from the Marine Bay, "my people are ready for ground assault. We can still get some of the colonists out." Sarah shook her head. "Negative, Colonel. We need to fall back. If we lose the fleet here, there won't be anyone left to warn the Federation." "Commander, with respect, we didn't come here to run." Sarah understood. Every instinct, every bit of training, every part of her Deathworlder heritage told her to fight. But sometimes, the most important battle was the one you chose not to fight. "All ships, prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. We're falling back to Federation space." "Commander," Rodriguez called out, "I'm still tracking the network signals. If we can capture one of their communication nodes." "Do it." "But we're not staying to fight. We get what we can and get out." The human fleet began to withdraw, but the Devourers weren't content to let them go. The smaller, faster ships began pursuing, their weapons adapting in real time to human defensive systems. What had been a minor threat when the battle began was now becoming deadly as the Devourers learned to counter human technology. "Retribution to all ships," Sarah called out, "we're going to cover the withdrawal. All other vessels, jump to hyperspace on my mark." Commander, we're not leaving you behind, Captain Torres protested. That's an order, Captain. Someone needs to get word to the Federation. The Devourers are back, and they're not the same threat they were a million years ago. They're learning, adapting, growing stronger with every battle. The human fleet began jumping to hyperspace, one ship at a time. Sarah watched them go, knowing that each ship that escaped was crucial to the galaxy's survival. But as the last ship disappeared into the void, she realized that the Retribution was alone, facing hundreds of Devourer vessels. Commander, Rodriguez called out, I've isolated one of their communication nodes. It's a smaller ship, lightly defended. If we can capture it. Do it. The Retribution changed course, diving toward the smaller Devourer vessel. It was a desperate gambit, but if they could capture even one piece of Devourer technology, it might give the Federation a fighting chance. The ship shuddered as Devourer weapons struck her hull. The armor held, but barely. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as systems began to fail under the intense bombardment. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. We're losing atmosphere. Seal it off, Sarah ordered. How much longer to the target? 30 seconds, Williams replied. Sarah watched the tactical display as the Retribution closed with the Devourer communication ship. It was smaller than the others, but it was still the size of a Federation cruiser. And it was adapting, its weapons systems changing to match the Retribution's approach vector. 20 seconds. The bridge shook as another barrage struck home. Sarah could hear the hull groaning under the stress. The Retribution was tough, but she wasn't invincible. 10 seconds. Commander, the Devourer ship is sending out a distress signal, Rodriguez reported. The others are converging on our position. Sarah looked at the display. Hundreds of Devourer ships were moving toward them, their weapons charging. Even if they captured the communication node, they'd never escape. 5 seconds. The Retribution struck the Devourer ship with everything she had. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and kinetic kill vehicles all converged on the target. The alien vessel's adaptive armor began to fail under the concentrated assault. Direct hit. The target is disabled, but still intact. Colonel Martinez, you're up. Take your Marines and get me that communication node. On our way, Commander. Sarah watched as the Marine shuttles launched from the Retribution, racing toward the disabled Devourer ship. But she could also see the other Devourer vessels closing in. They had maybe 5 minutes before the Retribution was overwhelmed. Rodriguez, I need you to find us a way out of here. Some kind of hyperspace window, anything. Working on it, Commander. But the Devourers are jamming our navigation systems. They don't want us to leave. Sarah understood. The Devourers had learned from the earlier engagement. They weren't going to let any human ships escape again. Commander, Martinez's voice crackled over the calm, we're inside the Devourer ship. This thing it's like nothing we've ever seen. The entire ship appears to be a single organism. And it's still alive. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Colonel, get what you can and get out. We're running out of time. Understood. But Commander, you need to see this. The communication node, it's not just a transmitter. It's a memory bank. This thing has records going back millions of years. The Devourers, they're not just weapons. They're refugees. Sarah blinked. What? The data is fragmentary, but from what I can make out, the Devourers were created by a species called the Architects. They were fleeing something that destroyed their entire civilization. The Devourers were supposed to be their legacy, their way of surviving extinction. Colonel, whatever they were running from, it doesn't matter now. They're a threat to every living being in the galaxy. Commander, I don't think you understand. The Architects weren't running from an enemy. They were running from the heat death of the universe itself. The Devourers aren't just weapons, they're an attempt to preserve life itself. They consume and adapt because they're trying to find a way to survive the end of everything. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. The Devourer's ability to adapt, to learn, to grow stronger with every battle. They weren't just trying to destroy the galaxy, they were trying to save it, in their own twisted way. "Commander," Rodriguez called out, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the surrounding Devourer ships. They're preparing to fire." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The Retribution was surrounded, outgunned, and out of options. But she'd learned something crucial: the Devourers weren't mindless destroyers. They were something far more dangerous, beings with a purpose, a mission that they believed justified any action. "Colonel, have you downloaded the communication nodes data?" "As much as we can, Commander. But there's something else. The architects, they left instructions. A way to communicate with the Devourers, to make them understand that their mission is obsolete." Sarah's heart raced. "What kind of instructions?" "It's complicated, but essentially, the architects built a shutdown protocol into the Devourers. They knew that eventually, their creations might need to be stopped. But it requires a specific sequence of signals, and it has to be transmitted from the original architect homeworld. Colonel, get back to the ship. Now." Sarah watched as the Marine shuttles raced back to the Retribution. The Devourer ships were closing in, their weapons charging for what would undoubtedly be a final, devastating barrage. "Commander," Rodriguez called out, "I found us a hyperspace window. It's narrow, but it's there." "Then let's go." The Retribution turned and burned toward the hyperspace window, her engines straining against the massive gravitational forces generated by the Devourer fleet. Behind them, hundreds of alien ships gave chase, their weapons lighting up the void. Just as the Retribution reached the hyperspace window, Sarah felt a massive impact. The ship shuddered, systems failed, and the lights went out. But they were already in hyperspace, already escaping. "Damage report," Sarah called out in the emergency lighting. "Hull breach on multiple decks," came the reply. "We're losing life support. But we're alive, Commander. We made it." Sarah slumped in her chair, exhausted. They'd escaped, but at what cost? The colony was gone, the Devourers were spreading, and the galaxy was facing a threat unlike anything it had ever seen. Rodriguez set course for Earth. "We need to get this information to Fleet Command." "Understood, Commander. But it's going to be a long trip. Our hyperdrive is damaged." Sarah nodded. They'd have time to analyze the data they'd captured, to understand what they were truly facing. But one thing was clear: the Devourers weren't going to stop. They'd been waiting for millions of years for this moment, and now they were free to pursue their mission of galactic preservation, no matter the cost. As the Retribution limped through hyperspace toward Earth, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just witnessed the beginning of the end. The Devourers were back, they were learning, and they had a purpose that made them far more dangerous than any simple weapon. The galaxy was about to face its greatest challenge, and humanity, the Deathworlders, the survivors, the ones who'd learned to thrive in hell itself, were the only ones who might be able to stop them. But first, they had to survive the journey home. 3 days later, the Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, her hull scarred and her crew exhausted. Sarah had spent the journey studying the data Colonel Martinez had recovered from the Devourer communication node, and what she'd learned had kept her awake for 72 hours straight. The Devourers were worse than anyone had imagined. They weren't just self-replicating weapons, they were a civilization in their own right, with their own culture, their own goals, and their own twisted sense of morality. They genuinely believed that they were saving the galaxy by conquering it, preserving life by destroying it. "Commander," Park called out from the communications station, "we're being hailed by Earth Defense Command. They want to know why we're 3 days overdue." Sarah activated the ship's main display, showing the blue marble of Earth hanging in the void. Home. It looked so peaceful, so innocent. But Sarah knew that if the Devourers had their way, Earth would be just another resource to be consumed and converted. "This is Commander Chen of the UES Retribution," she said into the comm. "I need an immediate meeting with Fleet Command. Priority Alpha." There was a pause, then a new voice came over the comm. "Commander Chen, this is Admiral Morrison. We've been monitoring Federation communications. We know about the Kepler incident. How many survivors? Sarah closed her eyes. None, Admiral. The colony is gone. Another pause. Commander, I'm ordering you to Earth immediately. We need a full debriefing. Understood, Admiral. But sir, this is bigger than just one colony. The Devourers, they're not what we thought they were. We'll discuss it when you arrive, Commander. Morrison out. Sarah turned to her crew. They looked as exhausted as she felt. Take us home, Williams. 6 hours later, Sarah stood in the briefing room at Fleet Command, surrounded by the highest-ranking officers in the human military. Admiral Morrison, a grizzled veteran of the Centauri Wars, sat at the head of the table. Around him were the other fleet commanders, intelligence officers, and xenobiologists who would help determine humanity's response to the Devourer threat. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Admiral Morrison said, his voice carefully controlled. The Devourers are not just weapons, but an entire civilization created by a species called the Architects. They believe they're saving the galaxy by conquering it. And they have a shutdown protocol that can only be activated from their creator's homeworld. Sarah nodded. That's correct, sir. The data we recovered suggests that the Architect homeworld is located in the Andromeda Galaxy. It's a one-way trip with our current technology. And you believe this shutdown protocol will work? I believe it's our only chance, sir. The Devourers are adapting to our technology faster than we can develop countermeasures. They're also spreading throughout the galaxy, consuming resources and converting them into more of their kind. At their current rate of expansion, they'll have consumed the entire galaxy within 50 years. Admiral Morrison leaned back in his chair. Commander, what you're suggesting is a suicide mission. Even if we could reach the Andromeda Galaxy, we'd have no way to return. And that's assuming the shutdown protocol even works. Sir, with respect, we're all dead anyway if we don't try. The Devourers aren't going to stop until they've consumed everything. They think they're saving the galaxy, which makes them far more dangerous than any simple weapon. One of the other officers, General Harrison, spoke up. Commander, what about the Federation? Surely they have resources we can use. Sarah shook her head. The Federation is in full retreat. Their ships can't even damage the Devourers effectively. They're evacuating entire sectors, trying to stay ahead of the expansion. Then we're on our own, Admiral Morrison said. Commander, I want you to work with our best scientists and engineers. If we're going to attempt this mission, we need to be absolutely certain it will work. Sarah nodded. Yes, sir. But Admiral, there's something else. The Devourers aren't just learning from our technology, they're learning from our tactics, our strategies. Every battle we fight makes them stronger. We need to be very careful about how we engage them. Understood. I'm placing you in charge of the Devourer Response Task Force. You'll have access to our best ships, our best people, and unlimited resources. But Commander, I want you to understand something. If this mission fails, if the Devourers continue to spread, then we're looking at the end of all intelligent life in the galaxy. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. I understand, sir. Good. Now, what do you need? Sarah had been thinking about this question for the entire journey back to Earth. I need a ship capable of intergalactic travel. Something fast, heavily armed, and able to survive in hostile territory for extended periods. I also need a crew of volunteers, people who understand that they're probably not coming back. Admiral Morrison nodded. I'll have the shipyards begin construction immediately. What about the crew? I'll handpick them myself, sir. People who fought the Devourers before, who understand what we're facing. Very well. Commander, you have 6 months to prepare. After that, the Devourers will have spread too far for any solution to be effective. Sarah saluted. Understood, sir. We won't let you down. As she left the briefing room, Sarah couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Humanity had been labeled as Deathworlders, as beings too violent and dangerous for civilized society. But now, when the galaxy faced its greatest threat, it was the Deathworlders who were its only hope. She just hoped they were dangerous enough. The next 6 months were the most intense of Sarah's life. The shipyards at Luna worked around the clock to construct the Prometheus, a ship unlike anything humanity had ever built. She was over 2 kilometers long, powered by an experimental quantum drive that could theoretically reach intergalactic distances. Her hull was made from the densest materials known to science, her weapons systems were designed to punch through anything the Devourers could throw at them, and her crew compartments were built to sustain human life for decades if necessary. But the ship was only half the challenge. Finding volunteers for what was essentially a suicide mission had been surprisingly easy. Word of the Devourer threat had spread throughout the human military, and there was no shortage of people willing to sacrifice themselves to save the galaxy. Sarah had chosen her crew carefully. Colonel Martinez and his Marines, of course. Rodriguez and his technical specialists. Navigation Officer Williams. Communications Officer Park. All of them survivors of the Kepler incident, all of them understanding exactly what they were facing. But she'd also added new faces. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who'd spent her career studying extinct civilizations. Commander James Wright, a tactical officer who'd developed new strategies for fighting adaptive enemies. Chief Engineer Lisa Thompson, whose innovations in quantum mechanics had made the Prometheus possible. As the launch date approached, Sarah found herself standing in the observation deck of the Prometheus, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were spreading, consuming, adapting. And somewhere in the Andromeda galaxy, the key to stopping them waited. "Commander," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Dr. Vasquez approaching. "I wanted to thank you for including me on this mission." Sarah smiled. "Doctor, you're one of the few people who truly understands what we're dealing with. The architects were trying to preserve their civilization, but they created something that's going to destroy everything they were trying to save." "It's the ultimate irony," Dr. Vasquez agreed. "A species so advanced that they could create self-replicating machines capable of surviving the heat death of the universe, but they couldn't see that their creations would become the very thing they were trying to prevent." Sarah nodded. "The question is whether we can be smarter than they were." "Commander," Rodriguez's voice came over the comm, "we're receiving final launch authorization from Fleet Command. All systems are green." Sarah took one last look at the stars. "This is it, Doctor. Are you ready?" Dr. Vasquez nodded. "As ready as anyone can be for a one-way trip to another galaxy." Sarah made her way to the bridge, where her crew was waiting. They all looked calm, professional, ready. But Sarah could see the tension in their eyes. They all knew what they were facing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said, taking her place in the captain's chair, "we're about to embark on the longest journey in human history. We're going to travel to another galaxy, infiltrate the homeworld of a species that's been dead for millions of years, and try to activate a shutdown protocol that may or may not work." She paused, looking at each of her crew members. "I won't lie to you. The odds are against us. We're probably not coming back. But if we succeed, we'll save trillions of lives and preserve the future of intelligent life in the galaxy." "Commander," Colonel Martinez said, "my Marines are ready. Whatever we find in Andromeda, we'll handle it." "Thank you, Colonel." "Rodriguez, are all systems ready?" "Yes, Commander. The quantum drive is fully charged, and all navigation computers are locked onto the Architect homeworld coordinates." Sarah took a deep breath. "Then let's go save the galaxy. Williams, take us out." The Prometheus pulled away from Luna, her massive engines beginning to glow with quantum energy. As they reached the edge of the Sol system, Sarah gave the order that would change everything. "Engage quantum drive." The stars around them began to stretch, then blur, then disappear entirely as the Prometheus entered quantum space. The journey to Andromeda would take 3 months, during which time the crew would prepare for what might be the most important mission in galactic history. But as they traveled through the void between galaxies, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Devourers had been spreading throughout the Milky Way for months now, learning, adapting, growing stronger. What if they'd learned about the shutdown protocol? What if they were already on their way to the Architect homeworld? Sarah pushed the thought aside. They'd deal with that problem when they reached Andromeda. For now, all they could do was trust in their ship, their crew, and their mission. 3 months later, the Prometheus dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Andromeda galaxy. The view was breathtaking, billions of stars spread across the void, many of them larger and brighter than anything in the Milky Way. But Sarah's attention was focused on the tactical display, which showed their destination, a small, unremarkable star system near the galactic core. Commander, Rodriguez reported, we're detecting artificial structures in the target system. The Architect homeworld is still there. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The homeworld was intact, but that didn't mean it was undefended. The Architects had been incredibly advanced. Who knew what kind of automated defenses they might have left behind? Take us in, Williams. But keep us at maximum alert. We don't know what we're going to find. As they approached the Architect homeworld, Sarah was struck by the planet's beauty. It was a garden world, covered in vast oceans and continents of green vegetation. But there were also clear signs of advanced civilization, massive structures that stretched from the surface into orbit, geometric patterns that could only be artificial, and energy signatures that suggested the planet was still actively powered. Commander, Dr. Vasquez called out, I'm reading massive data storage facilities across the planet's surface. The Architects didn't just abandon their homeworld, they turned it into a massive archive. Any signs of life? Negative, Commander. But the automated systems are still active. The entire planet appears to be a self-maintaining library. Sarah nodded. Colonel Martinez, prepare your Marines for surface operations. We're going down. As the Prometheus entered orbit around the Architect homeworld, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was the birthplace of the Devourers, the source of both the galaxy's greatest threat and its potential salvation. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd sacrificed, had led to this moment. Commander, Park called out, I'm detecting an automated signal from the planet's surface. It's in human language. Sarah blinked. What? The signal is repeating a message, welcome, inheritors. We have been waiting for you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Architects had been dead for millions of years. How could they have known that humans would be the ones to find their homeworld? Commander, Rodriguez reported, I'm detecting energy signatures consistent with Devourer technology. But they're not coming from the planet. They're coming from the outer system. Sarah's blood ran cold. How many? Hundreds, Commander. It looks like an entire fleet. Sarah looked at the tactical display, her mind racing. The Devourers had found the Architect homeworld first. They were already here, already in position to prevent any attempt at activating the shutdown protocol. Commander, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, if the Devourers have been here for any length of time, they may have already modified the shutdown protocol. They could have turned it into a trap. Sarah understood. The Devourers were adaptive, intelligent. They wouldn't just leave their greatest weakness unguarded.